Non-Americans of Reddit, what was the biggest culture shock you experienced when you came to the US? Everything being huge, literally, road lanes, groceries, soda sizes, especially distances. Where I come from, 3 hours of driving are enough to cross half of the country. In the US it's just a small drive to go to see a relative or something. Lawyer commercials, and if this happened to you, you can sue them commercials. When we first arrived and I walked up to a soda machine, we never had those, and I think I drank 10 to 15 refills of Coke before my parents started yelling at me. Unlimited soda, are you kidding me? Food advertising everywhere. It had been 20 minutes since we got our appetizer, which we were having trouble finishing cause the portion was so huge, when a woman came up to our table and said, "Hello, I'm Sheila, the manager," and we were like, oh no, have we done something wrong? But no, she was there to apologize profusely for our main course being so late. We figured it would be another 15 minutes or so, which would be okay since we were struggling with the appetizer, but nor as she was leaving our food arrived. If that was back home, not only would the food be later than 20 minutes, there would be no Sheila to beg for our forgiveness, and definitely not if it was literally 10 seconds away. Could not walk anywhere or take good public transport. Always had to take Ubers or hitch lifts. Everything was also huge. Cities, buildings, regular houses, food portions. I'd say people, but I did not see anybody who was hugely obese there at least. There was an insane amount of space, just point everywhere. As a European used to being crammed into every available nook, even in rural areas, the way that towns and cities just stretched out was unimaginable. The air conditioning everywhere, and the literal temperature shock between the inside and the outside of any building. People really care about their teeth, like whitening and straightening. I was talking to a friend about hair transplants. I said it would be nice to get inside balding, but I don't want to pay that much for something cosmetic. She says, "Have you thought about whitening your teeth?" Well, I hadn't, but ever since that comment I think about it all the time. Thanks, friend. Everyone I met treated me like a long lost friend. Yay. I also experienced this. I just loved it. It is not hard to get acquainted with people if they are so willing to take the first step with saying hi. I'm an introvert and a bit shy, so I helps a lot. Also, people is kind on average. I remember the first time I visited London, I was able to strike up conversations with quite a few people on the tube and on other trains as well. Usually they would hear my accent as I was talking to my brother, or if I said sorry for bumping them. If the carriage lurched, then they'd ask if we were Americans, and then we'd just talk about all sorts of stuff. Actually got recommended a good half dozen restaurants / pubs and some more out of the way things to do. Obviously my experience can't speak for everyone there, but from what I saw, despite the stereotype, Londoners do like to talk to strangers, just not other Londoners, lol. Not really a shock, but one thing that really surprised me was the sheer amount of flags. It was like almost every building had an American flag. Here in Belgium, if I see a house with a national flag, I assume there's some kind of sport event going on that I didn't know about. I was walking down the street and there were some road workers doing something a bit ahead. When I got near them, one of them approached me and super kindly asked me to cross to the other side, halted the traffic so I could cross, and wished me a nice day as I went along. In my country they would have probably heckled at me for not crossing, and I would have told them to go screw themselves for not signaling things properly as I walked in the middle of the street, potentially getting hit by a car. People pay for their own food. As someone who came from China, where everyone fights for the bill without the intention to pay, this is very refreshing. This is a generational thing, I think. If my parents are out with a group of folks their age, mid-60s, it's a whole thing that everyone wants to cover the check. Alright, well, I'm buying next time, etc. Everyone I know within 10 years of my age just assumes they are paying their own way, and it makes way more sense to me. Tipping, and not just tipping, but tipping so much that the entire thing I bought, for example a meal, is now in an entirely higher price bracket. Guns. A friend of mine worked in Houston, Texas for 6 months. he invited me, and I used the opportunity to travel to the US without paying for hotel and a rental car. His neighbor invited us to a small company party in the front yard of the company boss. We ate crawfish, very good, and after some beers I asked them if they own guns. 10 seconds later everyone pulled out their handgun and wanted to show it to us. For someone who was always into FPS games, this evening was really interesting, but also really scary. In Germany I never saw a gun in real life. That day I learned also that they don't like to discuss gun laws. Everything is sugar. The bread tasted like cake. No sidewalks. Not everywhere, but outside of major cities, you often literally can't walk between places safely. The first was on the train from the airport into New York. There were well-dressed people coming back from the races and they were sober. At home that would have been a heavily drunk party train. Oh, and then being able to buy 500 paracetamol at once in a pot. WTF. American here. I've experienced the opposite culture shock with the paracetamol thing in Europe. Once I had a fever in Spain and wandered around for an hour trying to figure out how to buy a fever reducer, wondering why it wasn't on shelves in the pharmacy. Eventually I realized I had to talk to a pharmacist and I think they gave me 4 total pills. I'm accustomed to everyone I know having a several hundred pill stash of ibuprofen or acetaminophen in their homes. So it was definitely a different experience. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, but don't identify as one. Because I grew up with different cultural values. Children here often are told Americans are racists and that we are not wanted. When I went over to Virginia everyone treated me as an equal and with respect. I have light dark skin and slight curly hair. My beard is similar to those of an Arab man. I was scared at first, but then I was like, wow, this is nothing like what you are told. Since early childhood, what the hell. People often stopped to say hi to me and asked how my day was. I was certainly impressed. I lived in the US during 2008 elections. Obviously TV was full of election advertising. I didn't see one of them that said, hello, I missed something. You should vote for me because of this and this. It was more like, hello, you shouldn't vote for Obama because he supports this and that and he is this and that. Vote McCain, or you shouldn't vote for McCain because he supports this and is old. Vote Obama. Everything was so negative. I was blown away by how clean the air and water was. Having traveled from India, there was a massive difference in air and water quality. Not just that, the kind of orderliness on the roads, plus the pedestrians having the right of way was amazing. Lastly, the politeness/friendliness of the people in general was something that took me a while to get used to. My dad came from communist Laos. He's been here for 30 years. I don't know if it was the biggest culture shock, but one was food. He lived in a small Laotian town. People often didn't have fridges or access to meat. Certainly not daily. Since he's come here, he's always grateful of grocery stores and his access to food. All kind of food too. All kinds of cuisine. All kind of whatever you need and all in abundance. To simply go to a grocery store and get everything you need in one trip. There's tons of foods here that weren't available in his home country. 2 of his favorite American foods are Jell-O and PB&J sandwiches. It is probably because it was pretty much the first thing I experienced, but the near worship level of reverence to the military. I've probably described that really badly. I flew in from Australia and was waiting for a connection from Lax to Denver. While waiting, I think every 15 minutes there was an announcement over the PA with a pre-recorded message thanking all the current and past servicemen and women for their honor. By no means am I anti-armed forces. I respect what they do, but it was a massive culture change from what we have here in Australia and other countries I have been to. I have no idea if this was a special occasion. It definitely wasn't Veterans Day, but for all I know, maybe there was a large influx of soldiers heading off/returning from the Middle East. As I said at the start of this post, it just really struck me as it is the first actual culture experience I had in the US. This probably says more about me and my preconceptions than anything, but by far the biggest shock for me was just how nice everyone was. Where I'm from in the UK there seemed to be a bit of a stigma towards Americans in general, which made me anticipate the worst, but every single person I've interacted with on multiple visits to the US have been phenomenally nice and approachable. No idea how common that is. Maybe I was just lucky, but it certainly made my experiences much better. My brother used to work in the travel industry in the UK. He always said that horrible, entitled Americans aren't as common as you think they will be, but when you do get one, they're on a whole different level. That's how I've come to understand Americans in general. Most of them are nice normal people, but then you get this group of them that are badass insane and very loud about it. Having to calculate the tax before you get to the till. It's a bummer when you think you have enough to buy something, only to realize the price on the product is not the price you pay at the till. Also, the huge gaps between the stalls in public bathrooms might as well go with the door open. The amount of times I've made eye contact with someone using the sink while I'm on the loo is uncomfortable. The thing that shocked me the most is how familiar it all felt. I'm from a very different country, but I watched so many films and series from the US, read their news, listen to their music, etc., that once I was there I missed the feeling of being somewhere new. Other surprises were that you pay more at the till than what the price tag says, and how behind much of the technology felt. My US friends that I was staying with couldn't do much with online banking. They had to go there in person. Checks are still in common use. You can't just buy a one-off SIM card. Lots of people have large old televisions, and when I encountered poverty, it was greater than anything I saw back home. And I'm from one of those countries US folk would only know as a war zone. How non-physical Americans are. I'm Latina, and every time I meet someone new it's considered polite to hug and kiss their cheek as a greeting. Obvi with professionals it's a no-go, but like if I'm introduced to a friend of a friend I would do a very light hug and kiss. It was mind-blowing to me that Americans mostly did the half-hearted wave or a handshake. The biggest culture shock for me was how down-to-earth, approachable, and helpful American teachers are to students. Where I'm from, teachers see themselves as God's gift to the world. If you finally gathered up the nerve to approach a teacher for help, you were practically painting a target on your back to be picked on by the teacher for the rest of the school year, because how dare you insult a teacher by suggesting that their lesson was subpar by admitting that you didn't understand their flawless lecture. That's why it took me so long to approach my teachers here in the US for help. I'm an American citizen born abroad and came here in late childhood. Beside the obvious visuals of not being in a developing nation, roads in the sky, overpasses, rows of candy bars at every store, ketchup everywhere, I was shocked by the fact that kids cared about brand name clothes and shoes. I cannot describe how odd it was to me to hear 11-year-olds pining for a certain type of shoe or pair of jeans because of the name on it. Also, physical affection between friends was not a thing. Girls didn't carelessly hold hands or kiss. Boys don't hug one another while walking down the street or in school.